Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Welcome, as Mike said, welcome to the DRC Insight Technology Training Webinar. It's nice to see everybody this afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to make it out this afternoon. My name is Abe Christ, and I'm from the Performance Office at the Connecticut State Department of Education. And our office works very closely with DRC to administer the lost links. And in fact, we've partnered with DRC for many years now to administer this test successfully. I have several colleagues on the call today. Michael Sabatos and Christy Alberino are on the call. I'm not sure if Janet Stuck or Megan Alubicki Flick are on the call as well, but they are also a part of our team that works to administer the lost links. In addition to loss coming out of our office, we administer our other summative assessments, which include Smarter Balanced and GSS, our alternate assessments, the Connecticut SAT School Day, the Kindergarten Entrance Inventory, as well as our Connecticut Physical Fitness Assessment. However, getting back to the topic for today, the purpose of today's meeting is to cover the technology aspects of the loss administration. Other details about testing will be covered at our English language assessment coordinator trainings later this month, dealing with policies and administration and so forth. So today is just about technology. And this is the first of two webinars. Please be mindful that the next one later this year is the same content. You don't have to attend both. If you're attending this one, you're all set. So again, thank you for taking the time to attend today's workshop to help make the 2023 loss administration a success. I'm going to turn it over back to our colleagues from DRC who know this content the best in order to take care of business today for technology.
All right, thanks, Abe. This is Jim Fleming. As Abe said, I work for DRC within our IT organization. I just want to restate a couple of things that Mike already stated. You are on mute, but I want this to be your training. And so this is, I'll be going through a lot of slides, but if you have questions along the way, please put them in chat. Put them in the chat, send them to all hosts and panelists, and I'll pause along the way throughout the presentation to see what kind of questions there are that are relevant to the topic at hand. And also the people monitoring it may stop me if there's something like really important that we do. So this is your session. So please take advantage of it and put your questions into the chat. I think it's also been said at the end of this has been recorded. We'll be posting the slides and this recording on the Lost Links, the Connecticut DRC Lost Links website, and the URL is down here below. And you're going to see this URL frequently throughout the presentation. The other thing I want to note too, this is the agenda, but the other thing I want to note too is I know some of you have been using DRC Insight to administer Lost Links for a while, and some of you may be new to your role. What we really want to do is cover both of those situations today and try to do a good foundation for those who are new and a good refresher for those who have done it before. So just keep that in mind. I'm trying to keep that balance between giving you the information based on where you are at. So hopefully we're successful doing that. So we're going to start out just by going through some key dates. Again, if you've been using DRC Insight in the state before, we're going to just talk briefly about what's changing, what's not changing from last year going into this year. A brief overview of the solution, again, just to ground everybody and remind everybody of what DRC Insight is. And then we're getting into some of really more the meat of the technology, the system requirements, the network requirements. And then talk about setup, technology setup, and then wrap up with troubleshooting and support resources. And again, time at the end for questions, but again, please put them in the chat as we go through this. So key dates, as Abe mentioned, this is going to be repeated on December 5th, the same presentation. So you have a couple opportunities. If you miss something, or if a colleague, you think would benefit from it, they could benefit from the recording, or let them know about the December 5th session. If you found this valuable and you think they would benefit from it, please let them know to attend the session scheduled for December 5th. The other key date here, probably one of the most important dates on here, at least from my perspective, is when testing starts. Test window opens on January 3rd and runs to March 3rd. So these are things we're going to talk about today that we want to get done before January 3rd, because all of our goals, I believe today, is to make sure that on January 3rd, students who are taking the DRC Insight Lost Links assessment have a good positive experience, that the technology does not get in the way or create frustrations. So that's kind of, again, the goal here is to get everybody ready for January 3rd. We also on January 5th, let's roll back to January 5th, the English Learner Assessment Coordinators will receive access to the Lost Links DRC Insight portal. We're talking about what that portal is in a minute. And then also districts can start scheduling. And I think, as Abe said, these kind of activities are going to more the administrative side of things are going to be covered in a separate webinar. What we're talking about today is getting everything ready for that. So what's changing and what's not changing from last year? So we did make one minor change in that we're adding in a new URL that we ask you to put on your network to be allowed on your network. And we'll talk specifically about what that is in a minute. What's being updated is really what we do every June of every year. So count on this, write this down, note it, that every June, end of June, we update the system requirements for the year. And we'll talk about the details of those system requirements in a minute. And we also release updates to our two installers. The DRC Insight Secure Applications is now version 13, and the COS Service Device is now version 6. Again, we'll get into more detail of what those installers are and where they go and their purpose in a few minutes, but just note that every year we release new versions. The DRC Insight Secure Application goes on every desktop, so if you refresh or re-image your devices over the summer, you know that at the end of June you're going to have that, the new version released, so that you can have that as part of your build. What's not changing is the operating systems that we support. We continue to support Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iPad OS, and Chrome OS. Basically, all the different operating systems you're going to see in a classroom, we support that. And so you're able to run our software on those devices. The other thing that didn't change is the specifications, the amount of CPU and memory you're going to need on testing devices or COS service devices. So basically, you could say if you have devices that you used last year, as long as they have a supported operating system, you can be assured you're going to be able to use them again this year. And then the other thing, again, we'll get into the more specifics on what a COS configuration is, but if you have configuration set up from last year, which most of you probably do, you don't have to start over. You're going to be able to continue to use those and manage those. And we're talking about how to manage those in later on in the technology presentation. So overview. So we took a high level, some may say relatively simplistic view of roles, and we kind of broke it up into three different categories. One is the English Learner Assessment Coordinators, and those are the ones who do all the things that are set up, to have requirements for setup in terms of the assessment side of things, getting students into the system, getting test sessions set up, and they use the DRC Insight portal. Then we have what most of you are as the technology coordinators, and you're going to use the DRC Insight portal as well, specifically for installation and configuration. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the central office services application within the DRC Insight portal. And you'll hear me refer to that pretty frequently as COS. So when I say COS, we're talking about the central office services application and all of its different components. And then, of course, we have the students. And the students are going to have a testing device, and they're going to have that testing device be secured using the DRC Insight Secure Application. So this is one of the installers as it goes on every testing device. You also noted that we have tools to get students ready for the test, for using DRC Insight, because we don't want the first time a student sees the DRC Insight interface to be the day of testing. So we want students to be comfortable with the different tools and the different item types they're going to have, questions they're going to have. So we have two tools. We have the test tutorial videos, and then also an opportunity for students to actually interact with the test, and that's the online tools training. So we really want students to have those experiences in advance. Your note that we have these also in the other two roles, and we feel it's really important from a student readiness and an overall people readiness, administrative readiness, to have those who are supporting students also understand the tools they're going to be using, so that again, we understand the tools they're going to be using, we can be able to support them doing that. So we do really encourage you to use these videos in the online tools training as well. Excuse me. So this is the DRC Insight portal. This is what it looks like for Lost Links. The URL is at the very top. Excuse me, ll.edirect.com. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you actually can log in to this portal. Give me 1 second here, sorry. All of a sudden got a tickle in my throat, so I apologize for that. Worst timing. So make sure that you are able to log in. Once you've logged in, you're going to see this landing page. At the very top of the landing page is, it says that you're in Lost Links, you're in the DRC Insight portal, and My Applications are going to show you all the applications that you have permissions to. So the DRC Insight portal is a permissions-based portal. In your permissions, you have access to different applications based on your permissions. I will pretty much guarantee that none of you are going to have exactly the same menu I have, because I have a lot of permissions. The two that you want to make sure you have access to are general information, and that's where all the downloads are, all of the documentation is, all that can be under general information. And then central office services is where we actually do the configuration. So don't worry if you don't see all these other things, because you probably don't have the role to do student setup. That's the coordinator role, assessment coordinator role. So just make sure you have these, and if you don't, then talk to the person who's managing your sites to make sure that they give you permissions to central office services and general information. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be installing and supporting here. There's 2 installers that you're going to be managing, and we're going to walk through that. One is the installer for central office services, and that is our content hosting solution. That brings content closer to students. The other is the installers that go on every single testing device, the DRC Insight Secure application, and it creates that secure test experience for students. Both installers are, for both systems and across all operating systems, are very user-friendly install wizards that you see when you install other software. We want to make this familiar for you, so we followed the kind of the pattern that you're used to when you do other installs. There is also no dependency or requirement that you put down any third-party software first. Everything that's in our installer that we need is in our installer, so you don't have to worry about that. The other is you can be pretty confident that our software is not going to conflict with other things running on the device. Installing the DRC Insight Secure application on a testing device is not going to break other software and vice versa. We're pretty confident in that because we're in over 50,000 locations around the country, and actually really around the world now. And to date, we haven't really found anything or reports that our software broke something or other software broke, wasn't compatible. So you can be pretty confident that we're going to have, really few issues once you install our software. And then lastly is that it automatically updates. So if we had a new version of the DRC Insight Secure application, once you've installed version 13, it would automatically update. We try to avoid that, but sometimes because of viruses or vulnerabilities, I should say, it may require us to address it because something new comes out and we have to make sure that we're creating a secure environment. So it's rare, but if it does happen, you don't have to go out there and reinstall it. You can, but it also know that it automatically updates. So let's talk a little bit more about that DRC Insight Secure application. Like I've alluded to this already, it is on every testing device, and it does one thing and one thing only. It creates a secure environment. It keeps the student in the assessment. If a student leaves the assessment to try to get an unfair advantage by going to the internet or going to other software, launch other software, it stops the test. View it as a very thin browser. That's what really all it is it's a thin browser that keeps students in the test to keep things fair. The Windows, Mac, OS and Linux installers are found on the DRC Insight portal under that General Informations application under the Downloads tab. For iPads, Chrome OS, and Windows 10 and S mode, you need to go to the corresponding vendor store. So for Apple or for iPad OS, you're going to go to the App Store, and you're going to get the installer there. You can do it, device by device, or you can use your own mobile device manager solution that you use to manage other software on your iPads. For Chrome OS, the installer is gotten from the Google Play Store, but it's not public. So if you don't have access to it already, what you do need to do is go to the Downloads tab under General Information to get the URL link to put into your Google Admin Console to find it in the Play Store. But again, if you've already been using our software, you already have these set up, these devices set up, and you have that link, and you're going to be able to get access to version 13 that way. We do require that all Chromebooks be under Google management. So this is where all the updates are going to come from. If we update to a new version, your Chrome Management Console is probably going to detect that in Google Play and automatically deal with that update for you. Windows 10 and S mode is unique in that its installer is only available in the Microsoft Store, and you have to do that device by device, and that's by Microsoft's design for Windows 10 and S mode. So if you have any Windows 10 and S mode, you're going to do it like you do, again, other software on that device and get it from the Microsoft Store. Next, let's talk about the other installer, the Central Office Service device, COS service device. It is our content hosting solution. We're talking a minute about why you would want to use it, but note that it supports Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so you get those installers again from the DRC Insight portal General Information Downloads page. The nice thing about the COS service device is it scales based on the amount of CPU and memory it has. So the more CPU and memory on a COS service device, the larger number of concurrent testers it will support. We also provide basic round robining. So if you have more than one COS service device, we will provide some basic round robining. If you want to use your own more sophisticated load balancer, we can do that, and I'll show you where to do that a little bit later in the training. So we get questions as to why do I need a COS service device? I have a very robust network. Why do I need it? Well, one is, it's really more of a more recent thing as we see more and more one-to-one devices in schools for instruction, is it does provide additional test security. Because if you have a COS service device, the student has to be on the same network as that COS service device to take the assessment. So that in order to get access to the content, you have to have access to that COS service device. So therefore you have to be on your network. So it makes it a lot more difficult for students to memorize their credentials, their username and password, not complete the test, and then go home and take it. They can't do that because they're not on your network. Doesn't prevent students from going to the library and trying to take the assessment, but there's generally administrative staff through the library who would see that kind of activity and report it and stop it. So it's not 100%, but it does provide additional test security that's really important. The other thing, what it was originally designed for, was to get content closer to students. And those of you who have administered a Lost Links assessment know it's not your typical assessment. Every question has audio and every question has images, and those get downloaded as a student navigates through the test. So there is a lot higher need for network bandwidth for Lost Links assessment. And so it helps reduce internet connectivity if you have a COS service device at your district. If you choose to put it at the local site, like in a lab, it reduces your wide area network capacity or bandwidth needs. But the more important thing is it does provide a more consistent experience across sites. The closer you bring that content to students, the more consistent experience students are going to have when they click next to move to the next question, when that audio or images are being downloaded. So consider it not only from a security standpoint, but consider it about dealing with equity across delivering an equivalent experience for students. So even if you have a robust network, if students have a little bit longer delay between questions, it's not delivering the same experience. So that's the overview. I'm going to pause just to see if there's any questions there. And then we could, we'll move on to talk some more of the technology and the system requirements.
So Jim, this is Catherine. I have a question for you. In terms of security, is there a way to simply restrict by public IP?
Let's talk about that in a few slides here when we talk about the IPs or the addresses that have to be restricted. And I don't know if that's going to answer your question or not. And if not, then we can maybe re-ask it and get clarification. So we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, I think.
That's
All
the
right.
only question we have.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So as I mentioned
Oh,
earlier,
sorry, we've got one more.
Yeah.
We only test on Chromebooks. Will a COS help our user experience?
Yeah, I mean, the COS service device is really operating system neutral. You're still dealing with your network. So no matter what types of devices you have, those devices are going to be pulling content over your network. So it's really more of a network consideration than it is an operating system on your testing device consideration. Again, it's not required. I'm just laying out some things that really you need to consider around that test security and delivering that consistent experience. Because again, even if you host it at your district office, I would expect not every connection out your wide area network connection and then your Wi-Fi connection in the sites is going to be equivalent. So if you have different disparities between those connections, you should consider putting it at the local site to reduce the discrepancies or differences within the student experience.
One more question came in on the COS installer.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an .exe that runs on Windows, or does it need to be standalone? Is there a PDF guide on deployment, for example, pointing the clients to the new IP?
Yes, we'll talk about the installing and setup of COS service devices in a few minutes when we do the technology. There's technology setup. We'll talk about how to install the testing software on the testing devices and the COS service device. So hang on, we'll get to that one in just a minute.
So we've got
Okay, so system requirements. I mentioned earlier, we publish that every year in June. And in that release, you can count on the fact that we will give you for the year what the system requirements are for the testing devices and then what they are for the COS service device. So we do publications later on in the year, and we'll talk about why in a second, but you can count on the fact if we say we need 4 gig of memory on a testing device, that's going to be consistent for the rest of the year. We're not going to come back in November and say, no, it's now 6. So know that what we have published in June under system or hardware specifications or requirements is not going to change. And in fact, that hasn't changed really for the last 2 or 3 years. We don't require a lot of CPU and memory. So that's why, it's really not changing year over year. We also then release a new version in November, actually November 3rd, and then in February. Now, why do we do that? It's because operating system versions change. In our system requirements, we don't talk about just hardware, we talk about what operating system versions we support. And as you know, Microsoft and Google and Apple are regularly updating their operating systems. Google even more so, about every 3 to 4 weeks. So that's what you'll see in the November and February updates, and we'll show that in a second year. The other thing is the operating systems that we support. I mentioned that earlier, but this is also documented in the system requirements. We support, again, Windows, Mac, Linux, iPad OS, and Chrome OS on the desktops, and then Windows, Mac, and Linux on the COS service devices. So I want to address a couple of questions that we frequently get on this. One is, why don't we support COS service devices on iPads or Chrome OSs? And it's because typically those devices don't have enough CPU and memory and disk space to support what's needed for the central office services application. So we do require a little bit more CPU and memory and disk space. So that's why we're looking at Windows, Mac, and Linux. So that leads to the next question of why have a lot of Chromebooks, like the question earlier or point earlier. Does that mean I can't use a COS service device because there's no Chrome OS? And the answer to that is yes, you can. A COS service device and a testing device's operating systems do not have to be the same. You can have a fleet of Chromebooks talking to a Windows, Mac, or Linux COS service device. In fact, much like you probably see in your buildings, you probably have a mix of testing devices. You may have some Chrome OS, you may have some iPads, and you may have some Windows. The same applies to the COS service devices. You could have a configuration with the Windows COS service device and a Mac OS COS service device. We offer a lot of flexibility. The DRC Insight solution is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We don't tell you, you got to do it this way. There's a lot of variations, and we provide that flexibility for you. Now let's talk about operating systems. I mean, as you know, operating systems continue to change. And so we want to give you kind of a path of how we support operating systems. And let's use the iPad as an example because it's really current. It just happened earlier last week in that Apple released a new version of iPadOS version 16. Know that we were testing iPadOS version 16 before it went into production. So we were in the beta channel, making sure that our software was working and giving feedback to Apple and vice versa. Apple released the new version of iPadOS 16 last Monday. And what happened is we move into what's called best effort because we still need to do some regression testing and make sure that what Apple had in the beta channel is what Apple actually put into production. So we will allow you to use it, but we're not necessarily going to say it's without any issues until we actually verify there aren't any issues. That takes us paying upon the release between 2 to 4 weeks. And then we move into full support. So again, just know that we're going to get to full support for example, iPadOS 16. It just we want to make sure that it's all, all solid before we say it's fully supported. So then we'll support that operating system as long as the vendor continues to support it. So what happened when Apple released iPadOS 16 is they dropped support for iPadOS 14. What we do is we don't pull support, pull it, out from under you right away. We move it into what we call best effort support for phase 3 for retired software. In this case, we'll continue to allow you to use it even though Apple doesn't support it anymore. But in this case, we may not be able to guarantee a resolution because a resolution may be an issue with iPadOS 14 and Apple isn't going to fix it. So we will do our best to support that, but we don't guarantee it's going to go without issues. But generally, if things worked in iPadOS 14 and our software was under full support, it's likely going to work, after Apple drops support for it. And then we're moving into end of support. So in this case, for iPadOS 14, we will continue to carry support for it through the rest of the year, because again, you may not be able to get off of it or get to, devices. You may have devices that don't support iPadOS 15 or 16, and you need those. So we're going to support that through the end of the year. But then at that point, it's going to be end of support. So what does that look like? So you're getting a quick view or an early view, a sneak peek of what the November 3rd operating system support is. And in here, the yellow is what's updated. So we are dropping support for Windows 8 in January because Apple or Microsoft is dropping support for Windows 8.1, but we're going to continue to allow you to use it through June. We're supporting the new version of Windows 11 22H2. It's under best effort support right now, and we're going to say within 30 days it'll be fully supported. Same is true or similar for Windows Server 2012 R2. Microsoft's dropping support of that later on this year. It's going to be supported through the academic year, but we're going to drop support for it in June when we release our new software because Microsoft is dropping support for it shortly thereafter. iPadOS 14 we walked through already. iPadOS 16 we walked through already, and the same kind of model is applying to iPadOS or macOS 10.15 and the new version 13. So we support a lot of versions of software. and they all run through our regression testing to make sure that, things are working. So you have a lot of different options here. The one I want to call out also is Chrome OS. Because Google is changing that every 3 to 4 weeks, we treat that a little bit differently, because you may say at the beginning of the academic year, you're going to update Chrome OS once and you're not going to maintain the operating system throughout the year. Probably not many of you are doing that, but some of you might. We strongly encourage you to stay on the most stable channel. That's what we call full support. But we do provide best effort support for older versions back to version 102. What we do every year is we take the version of Chrome OS that's active or fully supported under the stable channel when we release our software at the end of June, and that was 102 this year. And we will allow you to use that all the way through the stable channel. So again, we provide a little bit more window for Chrome OS just because they change it so frequently. And so therefore we're giving you that a little bit more flexibility there. This is a summary. I'm not going to go through it because I just went through all of this in the highlighted, but this is a reference for you in the slides if you want to look at it to kind of see where we are in supporting or what's changed with the operating systems support. We next get questions on device support. This really applies mainly to iPads and then Chrome OS devices. And our position is we will support our software on devices as long as the vendor supports that device and that device meets our system requirements for CPU, memory, storage space. Once the vendor drops support for a device, we will provide best effort for a short period of time, but really we have to end it because if they're not supporting it, we aren't. A prime example here is iPad OS models. They base their support of a model on whether or not it supports a supported operating system. So if there's an iPad, and there is, and I just don't remember the model of it right now, that only supported iPad OS 14, it doesn't support iPad OS 15 or 16. So technically that is now an unsupported iPad model. We will continue to allow you to use that through the end of this year as we continue to support best effort for iPad OS 14. Google takes a slightly different approach for Chrome OS devices. They don't base it on, does the operating system update work on it? Does the device have good CPU or memory? They base it purely on a date. They say they're going to allow you to use a Chrome OS device for up to 3 to 5 or 5 to 6 years after that device first went into production. It's not the date you bought it. It's a date that model first went into production. We have little to no control over that, and you don't really either in terms of Google there. They list off all the models and what their AUE date is, or auto update expiration date is. And once you hit that date, you are going to be finding that you're not getting operating system updates any longer. You're not getting there for the security and functionality updates. And worse is you're not able to manage those devices using the Google Management Console anymore. They may not suspend it right away, but they will. So from Google's standpoint, that's considered an unmanaged device. What DRC will do is allow you to use those unmanaged devices. As I mentioned earlier, we want them under management, and we allow you to manage that software. But we will allow you to be an unmanaged device as long as you're able to get our software updated on it before it went unmanaged. So let's say, for example, a device becomes unmanaged tomorrow, get our software on it today, and we'll allow you to use that as an unmanaged device as long as, again, it meets the CPU and memory and system requirements for it. So again, we're kind of stuck here like you are in terms of where Google is at on how they support this. And so we try to do our best to allow you to continue to use them, but it does require you to get that installed because Google, as I understand it, does not allow anymore you to do installing the software manually on these unmanaged devices. If you can figure out a way to do it, great. But right now, we're not aware of a way to get that done. This isn't necessarily as much of a need anymore as it used to be, as we're seeing more and more one devices. But if you are in a situation where you are having trouble finding enough devices to support students for testing, we do support what used to be called Neverware Cloud Ready. That was bought by Google. It's now called Google OS Chrome OS Flex, and I apologize for that flex going over on top of our logo. Chrome OS Flex is a reduced capability or feature operating system, but our software does work on it. And where you put that is on an older PC or Mac that's no longer able to support maybe Windows or Mac OS operating systems or support there, but does have enough CPU and memory for our requirements, and then you can install that. So you need to work with Google on that solution. But once if you need that and you're able to get Chrome OS Flex on it, again, we will support that, and I believe you're able to use those devices under Chrome management, and all is good. So that was a lot, but our system requirements is a more complete document that explains a lot of this. It's found in a couple different places on the DRC Insight portal under that general information's downloads. You scroll down to the bottom. This is a short list of our installers. I cut it so that we could see the bottom, and that's where the requirements are, or as a PDF off of the Connecticut Lost Links website with that URL again. Let's talk a little bit about the network, because this assessment is going to introduce some additional traffic or different traffic on your network. So we just want you to be aware of what kind of network traffic you're going to see during a Lost Links assessment.
Jim, can we just pause for a second, because we had a couple questions on Chrome OS.
Okay.
For Chrome OS, do the other tests that use a secure browser support Chrome OS 102 to current stable? In the past, we've gone, quote, too far, and our OS version was too new for support.
We support the new version of Chrome OS under the same method that we do for other. Now, as I showed you the life cycle, so when a new version of Chrome OS comes out, we support it pretty quickly. I mean, it's a lot shorter window there. It's days instead of a month, because of the fact it happens so frequently. The changes are smaller. When Microsoft issues a new version, it's every 6 months, so it's a major release. So we support the new versions of Chrome OS probably within a matter of a week after it's released. So you don't have to worry about being on the latest and greatest version of Chrome OS. We support that.
Okay, and then there's a comment, the Chrome OS is historical, so maybe we were not on the stable channel at that time.
Okay. But just know that right now, we will support you as long as you have Chrome 1 or 2, all the way to the most current version.
Okay, thanks.
All right, network traffic. So if you're using a COS service device for supporting the delivery of the Lost Links content, you're going to pull that content down to the COS service device before test happens. Again, keep that in mind, what else is happening on your network. That's going to be a lot of content coming down. So just be mindful that you're maybe not doing that during the middle of the day when there's other instruction going on or other administrative tasks on that leverage your network. So that all happens before testing. So now let's go to the day of testing. Students are in the classroom. They have the DRC Insight secure application in front of them. They launch it. And the first thing it's going to do is go back to DRC and download what we call the test engine. That's the user interface. So the user interface that the students are going to be interacting with, which we'll show you a little bit later, is not part of that secure browser or DRC Insight secure application. That is just a secure browser. So we load that down. That's going to be about 3 to 4 meg. So understand that that's happening. If you're concerned about the number of students hitting enter at the same time and having all of them get that traffic at the same time, just have them stagger a little bit. It doesn't take too much, more than 5 or 10 seconds to stagger that download to happen. So that's something you can do as well to manage any bandwidth concerns. Now the student has a test engine. The first thing they're going to be presented with is that login page where they have that username and password on their test ticket that they enter in. So when they enter that in, that's a very small piece of content going over the internet back to DRC. We're going to verify those credentials and then send back to the test engine what this test the student can take. Now the student is presented with the assessments, and they're going to see the Lost Links assessment, and they're going to pick the appropriate assessment. And at that point in time, if you have a COS service device, some content comes down at the very beginning that kind of introduces the test and it has some basic content that's going to be delivered down to the students. So if you have a COS service device, that's happening from that over your more local network. If you don't have a COS service device, that's coming from our cloud, Amazon CloudFront, which is our content distribution partner, over the internet, over your wide area network, over your local area network, over your Wi-Fi down to the students. So again, there's a lot more hops there. So just keep in mind, you know, are we delivering an equitable experience there? Now the students start taking the assessment, and there's 4 assessments that they take. There's a reading, a listening, a writing, and a speaking assessment. The first 3, the content that's going back to DRC is pretty small. You know, it's a multiple choice question or a short written response. For speaking, it's longer. It's more, it requires more bandwidth. As students talk, the longer they talk, the more bandwidth it's sent. We send that back to DRC in what we call slices. Every second we send a file. So it's got that 1 second of, you know, the student's response to kind of spread that out a little bit more. And then once the student is done responding, we slice that back together to create one audio file. So when that response goes to DRC, again, it's going to vary based on the type of assessment. It's going to get to DRC, and when the student has clicked next, when they're done, we will verify that we have that response, and then we'll send a message back to the test engine that says we've got the response, now move to the next question. So a lot of times we get questions of how do I know responses are being saved successfully at DRC? Well, the student won't move to the next question if we don't have that response successfully saved. The next thing that's going to happen is, because this is a media-rich assessment, it's got images and it's got audio, those are delivered throughout the assessment. So each question then, once the student hits next and the responses have been saved, they go to the next question, and we send back to the test engine the images and the audio associated with that question. So that requires more bandwidth than what you typically see in assessments. You don't have that happening. So just keep that in mind, that that's happening over your network as students are taking the assessment. Again, the closer that content is to the student, the better the student response is going to be in terms of getting that loaded and the student being able to move on. So here's a summary of what I just talked about in terms of the content. It's all delivered throughout the assessment. It's about 3 to 5 meg per question, depending upon, you know, how long the audio is for the question and the size of the images. What you're going to see from a response is going over your network back to DRC. It's going to be less than 5K for most of them, but greater than 600K for the speaking assessments. And we do require that students have a headset. So the audio is played back to them through the headset, and they have to have a microphone for the speaking assessment. So overall, just count on this requiring a little bit more network bandwidth than what you see with your typical assessments. But also, we recognize you're not testing likely as many students for a LostLinks EL assessment as you are for your other assessments. So you do kind of gain some there because you're not talking about the same number of students. Here's the IP, the addresses, the URLs we want you to put on your allow list. They are all the same as they were last year, with the new one that I mentioned earlier that's in bold here. Now, I think this is, and may answer the question that was asked before, is you can, if your network devices support it, wildcard. Most of these URLs end with drcedirect.com. So you can do the *.drcedirect.com if your devices support it. So you don't have to put in all of these addresses. You probably are not going to want to wildcard Amazon, AWS.com, because there's probably other things happening on your network that, you know, or other content there that you might want to manage. It is also really important, I think, if you didn't have these in your allow list last year, to do that. You know, we recognize, and I assume you're experiencing it, districts and schools are a lot bigger target now for hackers than they used to be. And so you're probably locking your network down tighter than you did last year. So we want to make sure that students can access our content. And so therefore, we really recommend, if you've been hardening your network, that you also make sure that we allow these things and, these URLs in your network. So that was the overview before we start talking about the actual setup of the network and the system requirements. Any new questions?
There's a question about where is this available in PDF format? So I think it was referring to the portal guide.
Or probably the system requirements.
Yes.
Yeah, and those will be available in a PDF for sure on the website, the Connecticut Lost Links.
Yeah, so they are posted
Yeah.
already. So the Lost Links portal user guide is posted on the Connecticut DRC website. And
Yeah, I think they're talking about the actual system requirements, and those system requirements. They were talking about the user guides in a few minutes. But yeah, those will be in a PDF off the Connecticut site. And we'll have that URL again in a few minutes.
Right. So I'm going to put those in the chat for the system requirements and the Lost Link portal guide user guides, so you guys can have access to them. Somebody asked a question, what about filtering by public IP?
I'm not familiar with what you're asking there, so I think probably the best thing to do is give customer service a call on that, and they can go through that.
Yeah, the question was, can we designate where tests can be taken for our school?
That is probably something more for your, sounds like it's more within your network configuration as to whether or not you want to allow, our URLs to be allowed across your network or just limited to certain schools or locations. So if you can do that within your network, it does provide additional security if you're not testing in every single location. But it does introduce, again, some additional complexity for you, but you can do it by location if you're able to do that. Again, maybe more specifics on that one, give customer service a call, because I've not actually had that question before, so I'm not sure 100% on.
Yeah, the clarification came in. My expectation was that the DRC servers would be filtering by IP, not our network.
Why don't we take that offline?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, technology setup. So before we get into the central office services application on the DRC Insight portal, let's talk a little bit about what central office is managing. It's what we do within central office services, or COS, is we create and monitor and maintain what we call COS configurations. So that leads to the next question: what's a COS configuration? It is where we establish a relationship for testing devices to know what testing programs they can deliver, the DRC manages, and where to get the content. So view a COS configuration as this blue box. So this blue box is a COS configuration. And what we bring into the blue box, using what you've probably heard of before is org unit ID, is we put the org unit ID for the COS configuration on every testing device. So that testing device now has a home. It's in this COS configuration. The next thing the COS configuration has is what programs it can support. So of course, we want the Lost Links program as part of this COS configuration. The third component of a configuration is where to get content. So if your COS configuration has a COS service device or multiple COS service devices, it's associated with a configuration. And again, that tells these testing devices, I can administer Lost Links, and this is where I get my content. If you don't have a COS service device and you want to deliver that content from DRC, you still need a COS configuration, because again, the testing devices need to know what programs to get. But by the fact that COS configuration doesn't have a COS service device, we get content from DRC. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to build this and how to maintain it. But I wanted to kind of, level set everybody in what we're talking about from a COS configuration is refer back to, or think back to this blue box and how it creates the relationships between devices and programs and content. So we're going to walk through 3 common activities. One is installing a new COS service device. Other is how to manage testing devices to get DRC Insight secure application on them. And then also then a lot of time talking about how to use that central office services application to manage configurations. So on this first activity, we're going to add in a new COS service device. And we get questions of why do I want to do that? Well, one is you may not have one. And now you think for test security and equity reasons, you want to add one into a configuration. You may have retired the one from last year, so you need to replace it. Or you're going to have more kids testing, so you want to add in additional COS service devices. So those are kind of the common use cases as to why, if you've already got something established, you would need to go through this process. So we determine we need a new COS service device. So we're going to identify a machine that has a supported operating system, so Windows, Mac, or Linux. That machine can be a physical device or it could be a virtual device. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a server. If you're only going to be testing a few students and you have concerns about maybe bandwidth, you could put if you still have labs and you still have desktops and labs, you could put at a location, a COS service device on a lab and in a lab, and those students at that location would get their content locally. So there's a lot of variability in this. So identify that machine, download from the DRC Insights portal under general information, the corresponding installer for that download, and put that on the device and then launch it. It is going to be a pretty common install that you see when you do others. You're going to get the standard prompts along the way, where to put things, where, default locations. You don't have to use the default locations. We recommend that you do, but you don't have to. If you want to put the application itself in one folder and content in a different folder than what we recommend, go for it. We allow you to do that. So that interaction is going to vary based on whether or not you're using defaults or not. But there is one that we do, dialog box, we do require you to interact with, and that is to make sure that the service ports the COS service device needs to talk to testing devices is available. And there's 4 of them. We start out with 55222 through 55225. If you're on a dedicated machine, click next and it's going to work just fine. If you're not on a dedicated machine, those ports may be used by other software, which is fine. That's just fine 4 that are available. So you're going to need to do, put in different base ports until you have 4 ports that are available, and you get this ports are available dialog box and click OK. We're going to go through the rest of the install on the device, and the last thing you're going to see is the setup complete page. Saying that the install on the machine worked. You're going to notice, and again, these are the different pages based on the operating system, but they all have a URL down here. We recommend that you copy that URL and just keep it in case this next step doesn't work, because it's kind of a 2-step process. One is installing it, and the other is putting it in a COS configuration, which we need the portal for. So let's keep that just as safekeeping, and then click Finish. What will happen next is you're going to go into the DRC Insight portal. Now, if you're already logged in and you haven't timed out, you're going to go straight into the portal. But generally, most of you are probably going to have to authenticate back into the portal. So you're going to be taken to this page to authenticate back in. And then rather than going to that landing page I showed you earlier, you're going to go to this page, which is that URL. So if you don't see this page, put that URL in your browser and click, enter, and you're going to get to this page. What this page is going to do is complete the configuration of that COS service device. It's going to default to a 5-step process. And what that 5-step process is, assuming that you don't have a COS configuration. So you're not only going to install the COS service device, but you're going to create a new blue box. Most of you don't need that because you already have a COS configuration. So what we're going to walk through today, for the sake of time, we're not going to do the 5-step process. Click on this little box here that says use existing configuration, and now we go to a 2-step process. Pretty straightforward. First step is give that COS service device a name. We don't care what you call it, as long as it's between 3 and 50 characters. So whatever naming conventions you have, you give it a name. And the next thing is we're going to find that COS configuration we want to add this COS service device to. So let's go find that blue box. You're going to put in Lost Links as a testing program. You're going to put in the site that that COS configuration is associated with. And then what we're going to do is, assuming you have multiple COS configurations, we're going to go find it by typing in any part of the name of that configuration. So it can be the beginning of the name or the middle of the name. As soon as we start matching 4 letters for any configurations that meet this filtering criteria, you're going to see them in a drop down. Pick the one you want. You're going to see that name and org unit ID here to confirm it. You confirm it. You say, yep, that's the one I want to add this to. You click complete. And now that COS service device is now part of that COS configuration. It's part of that blue box, and content from that COS service device will be delivered. Testing devices will use that. This is the dashboard. We're going to come back to the dashboard in a minute, but there's 2 things I want to call out before I leave this. And one is, if you do that 5-step process, which is documented in the technology user guide, you're going to create a new COS configuration. And so that name is going to be added to your list. So in this case, there's 6, there's going to be a 7th one. That may not be there right away. So don't be concerned if when you see this, it's not there right away. Come back 3 to 5 minutes later, refresh, and it'll be there. We have some back-end processing we need to do to get that ready for display. So just keep that in mind. The other is, which is a very common question, is where do I find the org unit ID? And this is where you find the org unit ID. You find that COS configuration name that you want. In this case, it's staging, public VM. This is the org unit ID, and we're going to copy and use that org unit ID in step 2 when we start talking about testing devices. So just keep that in mind. This is where we get the org unit ID. Okay, step 2, installing manually DRC Insight Secure applications. I know most of you are probably going to be using software distribution, but we want to go through the manual process. We'll talk about software distribution in a little bit. So I'm going to install on a Windows device the Windows DRC Insight Secure application. So I'm going to go to the DRC Insight portal, general information, downloads, find that installer. In this case, I know it's an MSI file. You're going to put that on the device. You're going to launch it, and then you're going to see that typical wizard that you see with other software. Pretty short though, not as long as a COS service device wizard, because this is not very complicated. Remember, it's basically a thin browser. At the very end, you're going to see the finished page, and you're going to see this little check mark here for launch system readiness check. What that does is when you click finish, it'll show you this screen here, and it'll say, does this device meet all our minimum or recommended specifications that are documented in the system requirements? So ideally, every single box you see here or row here has a green check mark. That means everything is good. If anything is yellow, it means it's maybe not ideal, but you can still use it. So RAM, again, we recommend 4, but if it's 2, it's going to be yellow, and we're going to give you the details. You click on that and you can say, oh yeah, it's 2, and I'm okay with that. If it's red, it means it does not meet system specifications. Again, from a display standpoint, we have requirements, and the department has requirements on what the screen resolution needs to be. And if it's not meeting that, it's going to be red, and there's not much you can probably do about it, but that's why it's red, and we click under details as to why. Every time the DRC Insight Secure application is launched, not only when it's installed, but when we launch it, we run this readiness check to verify that that device is will still deliver a positive experience. So again, we recommend you do this even after you install it, maybe a few days before, randomly check some devices. It eliminates any delays on the day of testing to make sure these devices are still working. Okay, we've got the DRC Insight Secure application installed on this device, but it doesn't have an org unit ID yet. It's not part of that COS configuration. So when you launch the DRC Insight Secure application, you're going to get right away configuration not found. I don't know what COS configuration I belong to. So click on assign that device ID. We're going to paste in or type in that org unit ID that I showed you off the dashboard earlier. Click add and register. And now this testing device has a home. It's now part of that COS configuration. It knows it can take lost links assessments, and it can get content from those COS service devices. Okay, now let's talk about managing these configurations you already have. So this is the dashboard, and this is where you can come in before testing ideally and verify everything is okay. We provide you some quick visuals at the very top of the dashboard for this. We're using our demo product Showcase, but it works the same way across Lost Links in our sample school. And this has everything is looking okay. We do have one COS configuration that's not found. It's probably on the next page. It's not one I'm using, so I don't care about it. But if it's one I plan on using, then I better go resolve what that issue is. Down below, it lists off all the COS configurations that are part of this site for Lost Links. Gives you a quick snapshot of information for it. Its name, its organ ID. Is it healthy? And you want everything to be functional. If it's not functional or there's issues, we'll give you information about that status. How many COS service devices there are, how many testing devices, and how many different programs. In your case, it's going to be one, it's Lost Links. So if I want to edit that or change that, I would click on sample COS configuration. But before I do that, I want to call out on the top of every single page within Central Office Services is a help question mark. That's online help. You click on the help, you would get a choice of, do I want help for this page or just COS in general? I want it for this page, and it gives me the online help for that. So this information used to be in the technology user guide. We moved it forward into the application, so it's at your fingertips. Another tab opens. So you're still in Central Office Services, but now you can toggle back and forth and get your questions answered without having to go find a manual. The first thing you're going to see when you hit when you launch the hyperlink is you're going to go to the configuration information tab. There's 7 tabs within Central Office Services, and we're going to go through each one. This one's pretty basic. This is where you can change the name of the configuration. You're new to your job, somebody else had set these up. You don't like how they named them, you can come in here and change it. So pretty straightforward. This is where we also allow you to have a little bit more control over how Windows, Mac, and Linux devices get updates. You probably have software distribution, and you may say, I don't want, if DRC comes out with version 13.1, I don't want the devices to automatically update. I want to push it out myself, which is fair. You want to manage your devices. But we still encourage you to have it toggled to do automatic updates, because if you missed a device and now that student is trying to launch the DRC Insight Secure application and it can't do automatic updates, it's on version 13, it requires 13.1, that student cannot take the assessment until you update it. So it's just kind of a safety net, so that if you miss anything, what will happen is the device will then ping DRC, download 13.1, install it, and the students will continue on. There'll be obviously a little bit of delay where that update's happening, but it's better than the student being dead in the water and having to wait for an update to happen. If you change anything here, make sure you click Update Configuration. So if you change the name, you click Update Configuration, and that'll be applied. The next tab over is Testing Devices. These are all the testing devices that are in that COS configuration or inside that blue box. Pretty basic information. In this case, I have 3 testing devices. I get the name of the device, the version of operating system, the username, the operating system type. We use the icons for that, IP address information. The column that says last seen, we get questions on. The DRC Insight secure applications don't have a phone home. They don't ping back regularly because there's just probably too many of them on your network, and you don't need that unnecessary that traffic on your networks. We don't do it. So the last seen date is the last time the DRC Insight secure application was launched, or view it as the last time the readiness check was run. So it's run when you install it, and then it runs every time a student launches it. So look the last seen. Again, they should all be the same date that you installed it, but if some of them are like really old, that means either these devices aren't needed anymore because you don't have them, so you can do some house cleaning, or you miss some devices and you're going to have to go and find those to update them. So use that last seen date to kind of get an update to say, okay, it's better be the date I installed all my, updated all my devices or sooner. And if it's not, then you know that device is probably doesn't have a current version of DRC Insight Secure application. Next tab over is service devices. This is where you will see all the DRC COS service devices in your environment. A couple critical things on this is where, again, you can see your, whether everything is functional from a content hosting and content management standpoint, the operating system version, if you're having trouble, and or maybe it's because it's an unsupported version, you can find out what version you're running. This is a critical one. This is saying, am I running version 6 or above? Now, we automatically update COS service devices if they're left on overnight with an internet connection. So if you leave your COS service devices on overnight with that internet connection, you never have to worry about updating them because we take care of it. We have a new release 6.3. It'll get updated overnight when we release it. But you may not choose to leave your devices on overnight. You might be in a lab in a classroom and you turn off all those devices and you only turn them on when you need them. So this is where you can manually update that. Click the checkbox, click update version, come back in a half an hour, and this version 5 will now be version 6, 6.2, I think is what we're currently on. So just verify that's how you do it manually. We also tell you whether or not the content is functional or not, but this is kind of a tricky one in that what this functional tells you is that all the content files are there. Doesn't necessarily tell you are any of them corrupt. Now, not likely your files are going to get corrupt, but it does happen. So one thing we recommend before testing starts is you validate that content. What that validate does is that it goes through all the content files, not only make sure that they're there, but make sure they aren't corrupted at all. So ideally you run that before testing starts. It's not required, just a suggestion. We recommend that you also do that validate when kids aren't testing. It doesn't require, it doesn't cause the system to reboot, but it takes a lot of CPU and memory. And the more CPU and memory you're using for this, the less CPU and memory you have to support students testing. Locations is where we tell you what the COS configuration, what programs it can access. In your case, it's pretty simple. There's one program, it's lost links, but you want to maybe come in and validate that you have lost links in that blue box so that students can take that. So that's where you're going to see lost links. Under content management is where we verify that all the content that we're hosting on the COS service device is downloaded. You may decide you don't want all of the content coming down. You may decide you're not going to use some of these assessments. So you're going to say, again, local control would give you the ability to say how much content you want down. Again, we recommend just for safety purposes in the sense that all the content's there. When I say safety purposes, is if a student needs an assessment that you're not aware of, and that content is not on the COS service device, and that COS configuration has a COS service device, there's, the student's going to error out because the content's not going to be there. So for, err on the side of having more content than less, again, unless you're running some pretty tight resource constraints and you don't have necessarily all the disk space. Content hosting is a tab you probably are very rarely going to use, but just know that it's there. If for whatever reason, your COS configuration has COS service devices and you need to disable them and have content come from DRC, you can do that really quickly, and you can do that without having to delete COS service devices. Because if you delete them, you're gonna have to go through the process of re-adding them. So toggling this enable content hosting to off gives the COS configuration, fakes it out, and just says, even though there's a COS service device here, get content from DRC. This is also where you would put in that load balancer if you want to use your hardware load balancer instead of our basic round robining. So you click on that, toggle that over. There'll be some additional information, for that load balancer. Look at the technology user guide for that, and that's where you'll be able to use your own hardware load balancer. Lastly, back to testing devices. I showed you how to do device by device, put that org unit there. But again, most of you are probably using software distribution. So you're going to want a script that we're going to provide. How do we provide you a script that's got that org unit ID in there that you want to be able to distribute out to machines as well. So you get that off of the deployment tab, click download configuration, that script will be generated, and that script will be distributed out to all the testing devices as well. So therefore, because that script is there, then the DRC Insight secure application recognizes the org unit ID off of it and then goes, knows that it's part of that COS configuration. That was a lot. I'm going to pause just because I need a drink of water. But while I pause, are there any questions out there about all the setup and configuration that we just talked about?
So there was one question that you answered as you continued talking. So that was all taken care of. And right now, don't really have any open question, but we can give people a minute or two if they have questions.
Okay, you can put them in. I'll continue on. We have about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get through the rest of this. But
Okay.
Again, put in questions. I can always go back. Know that. So, how to prepare testing devices. So we've added this to the presentation this year because there's been a lot more questions about it. And this one topic specifically, as we're seeing more and more one-to-one devices for districts or sites using them for instruction, what are some additional things we need to do around test security? We talked about the first one already, but we're going to bring it up again. Just have a COS service device. You may not need it for your network, but you may want it for test security. So it really does prevent students from taking the assessment offsite. COS service devices are really relatively easy to install and get set up. So again, we recommend that you do that and get that test security. The other thing that, it's not necessarily easy to do, I get it, but it is an option of being a little bit more mindful of when you add in the DRC Insight Secure application and when you remove it. So if you know when students are going to be testing, put it on immediately before and then take it off afterwards. That makes it obviously a lot harder for students because software's not there. It's a little bit easier to do that maybe with the Chrome Management Console because those are all managed through there, and that makes it easy to be able to add and remove software. Other device platforms are going to vary based on the sophistication of your software management tools. Again, I'm not saying that it's easy and not necessarily even logistically possible based on you having to know what students are testing when, but it is something that can be done and considered if there's a significant concern around test security at your sites. And the other one, even though it's not your role, I view it as all of our roles, to support those test administrators who are passing out the test tickets, to keep them reminding them that those tickets need to be secure. Doesn't stop a student from memorizing their username and password, but let's not make it easy for them by having them walk out of the room with those test tickets. So it's maybe just a reminder to the test administrators. They've probably been reminded a few other times. But again, if you see a student walking out of a room or carrying around a test ticket, that's one of the things we should be doing is making sure those are kept secure. Some other things around preparation. One thing we want to really note, again, this is more important now with one-to-one devices, is DRC software or DRC Insight Secure application does not change device settings. So we do not go in there and turn off things that we don't like or think that things that we shouldn't be on for test security. We really rely on you to do that. In fact, operating systems don't let us do that. If we see software running, our software can't disable it because that's what hackers do, right? I mean, they go in there and they try to disable things. Operating systems are getting more sophisticated and limiting that. We also don't turn off background processes. And so really from a test security standpoint and from a device performance standpoint, we recommend you do some things. Device performance is really more a matter of the less things running on that device, the more CPU and memory available for testing. So one thing that we recommend you do is temporarily disable updates to operating systems and software, or make sure that all the software and the operating systems on the testing device are fully up to date before a student tests. We're not recommending you turn them off permanently or whatever. It's only during testing. And why we recommend that is you don't want an update to happen while students testing. Again, conserving CPU and memory for testing. But worse, if that update requires a reboot, you don't want a student having to take a reboot of an operating system update in the middle of testing. So again, that's really from a student experience standpoint, we don't want that. And then we also don't turn off their own background process. And let's talk about that a little bit more. As we're seeing more and more one-to-one devices for instruction, we're seeing a lot more instructional software running on devices. So there's things that are taking up CPU and also may be used as an unfair advantage for students. So these are just some of the categories that we commonly hear about is, typing assistance or grammar checking for Grammarly, classroom monitoring tools, remote access, remote control tools. We can't turn those off. We recommend that you do, but if you can't turn them off, make sure the test administrator knows they're running in the background. So as they're walking around monitoring students, they can keep an eye out for them and making sure students aren't trying to use them. The other thing is personal intelligent assistants. If you're using an iPad, Siri, or a Windows device, Cortana, or any other ones, we don't turn them off. You're probably turning them off already through group policies because they're really not used for instruction. But if you don't already, make sure they're either turned off before testing, or again, let the TA know they're running so they can keep an ear out for them. Collaboration tools as well, whether it's Teams or Zooms or Google Chat, Google Meet, turn those off, or again, make the TA know they're there. And the same thing with screen capture software. If they're using a Microsoft Windows device, if they're using the API as part of the operating system for the game bar, we can identify that and the test if a student does that. But not all operating systems or all software we're able to do that, because part of the operating system we're able to identify that on a Windows device. This is really not for immediate cheating. This is where a student could capture a screenshot of a question or videotape their assessment and then make that content available on the internet, now compromising those questions for future use because other students would have access to them. Some tips on Chrome devices. One of the common things we get is a question is not displaying properly on a Chrome device. Interesting, it can be just like one question out of the number of questions the student sees. So it's kind of random sometimes. The first thing you should do is verify that screen size on that Chrome device is set to 100. Easy way to do that is Control-Shift-0. And that will set the screen device to 100. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to resolve the issue and save you a call to customer service. There's other ways to do it, Control-Shift plus or minus to zoom in or zoom out, or going into the settings. But the quickest way is just Control-Shift-0 and gets it to 100%. All right. Don't see any other questions. I'm keeping an eye on the chat too in my, out of the corner of my eye. So I'm going to continue on, but again, send them our way. We got 9 minutes left, but I can hang on longer. So just keep that in mind. So we're not, so troubleshooting, as much as we do and as much as you're going to do to prepare for testing, there's going to be potential for issues because we're dealing with technology and we're dealing with people. So what we recommend is you have a plan in place before testing starts so that in the event of a network issue or a configuration not found where the testing device isn't part of a COS configuration or the headsets are missing and they need them, let's make sure we support the test administrators who are, sitting in with the students and trying to make sure they're having a good experience. They're, the front line has what they need in order to know what to do to escalate if there's an issue. And this is a hypothetical. I mean, every site's going to be different. In this case, this site has a plan to say, okay, if there's an issue, they call after they do what they can, they call the school technology specialist. And if they can't solve it, they go to the district support. And if they can't solve it, they call DRC. This is not the plan. This is an example of it. Make sure that these folks are properly supported and have that plan in place and can figure it out so you're not making it up kind of on the fly if an issue happens. Plan for the worst, but I think most of you are going to have the best and not have issues, but plan for it just in case. If an issue arises, a fair question is this my issue or is DRC having an issue? So we provide you a status page. It's down at the bottom. It's status.drcedirect.com capital L's lost links LL. This will give you information on, is online testing, are we having any issues there? There's also another application within the DRC Insight portal that educators use called educator scoring. Or, if there's a problem with the DRC Insight portal, either COS or any of those other applications you saw. If there are any issues, we'll change the status and you can click on the status, get an update. What I didn't do is an updated screenshot where we updated this year, and there's going to be a little help question mark up here, like you saw on Central Office Services. You click on that, give you a definition of what the different statuses are. So if we say degraded performance, hypothetically, you could click on it and say, what does that mean? At least what is DRC defining as degraded performance? Another thing we want you to be aware of is we no longer do content caching, where we're caching student responses. That was designed for in a day when the internet connectivities were very spotty, not very reliable. Most cases, most sites, most districts have very reliable, scalable, robust internet connections. The issue now is at the Wi-Fi level. Wi-Fi is great. Testing devices can move from room to room and everything without an issue, but we also require a consistent connection to an access point. Device moves from one access point to another randomly. That can cause an internet delay or loss temporarily, or there's something that blocks a line of sight from the testing device to the access point that blocks it temporarily. We don't want to end the test. So what we do now is what we call retries. We will do a couple retries in the background to try to get that connection reestablished. If it's not, then we give a dialog box or a warning message to let the students know there's something happening. You don't need to, just to let them know what's going on. So this is where we now have more local control. When this happens, the student can raise their hand and have the TA come over. But in most cases, again, 9 times out of 10 or even higher than that, and probably 90 out of 100, well, probably the same as 9 out of 10, 95 out of 100, the connections get reestablished. And as soon as it does, this dialogue goes away and the student goes back into the test. So TA should know if they get raised hand by the time they get there, this message may be gone. If it's still there, the TA has some choices to make. If every student in the room raises their hand, then it's probably not an access point problem. There's something else happening somewhere along the network. So they could direct the students to exit the test, get the issue resolved, and they could all come back in, log in, and they'll pick up exactly where they were. The TA could say, no, let's wait. Let's just see. Let's see what happens. We'll give it a little bit of time, especially if it's only 1 or 2 students. What will happen generally is the connection will get reestablished. It just took a little bit longer. Maybe the issue was a little bit more, pronounced for that device, and it had to do a little bit longer. But if the TA decides to wait, we give it a time frame. After 5 minutes, if we haven't been able to reconnect, we will give a connection error. Likely the TA would have stopped it before that, but after 5 minutes, we say that's enough, and the student will either get that, the issue resolved, and then use that device to reconnect or go to another one, whatever, but they will log back in and pick up where they were. It's very rare we ever get down to here, given your networks are probably very robust now and have a lot of failovers in them. But again, this is a much better experience for students than having them get kicked out every time there's any kind of blip on the network and have to relog back in. We have a special technology bulletin on this that we recommend TAs are aware of, because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with this. So make sure they're aware of this. There's a lot of other material that we make available, readiness material. We're going to go through some of these, but use this as a reference. We want to give you a lot of documents that you can reference and use to, again, make sure things are configured right and students are getting a good experience. They're all available on the Connecticut DRC Lost Links website. Again, you can maybe hardly see it down here, but it's lostlinks.com/Connecticut-information. So all of our documentation, you can see it over here under the technology resources, scroll down and you'll see that. So the technology user guide, which was mentioned earlier, this is a very detailed document. I have a lot of information in here, 4 volumes. We put a lot of information in there because a lot of you want that or need that, but also note that for central office services and the volume 2 and volume 3 for the DRC Insight secure application, it's also chaptered by operating system. So if you're only using Chromebooks, you only need to look at Chrome OS. So, don't be, you just know that you can get to information quickly. The troubleshooting is a very useful one because all the several frequently asked questions in there, plus all the error message that you see and what actions you can take if a student sees an error message. We've already seen this page, but it's also just to note that this online help is available outside the portal. You don't have to be in central office services. Now, granted, this is a very long URL. If it's not on the Lost Links page, we'll make sure we get it there so that you can actually get access to this without having to type all that in there. So we'll make sure that it's there if it's not there already, so you can actually get to the online help for central office services at any time. Technology readiness checklist. If you've been testing with us for a while, that's great, but you still should go through this checklist because your technology platform environment changes, our technology changes. It's good to go through and make sure things are ready. At a very minimum, we strongly recommend you do the day of testing checklist before students start testing, especially that first day, to make sure everything is ready to go. So when that student sits down, they have a positive experience. Here's our headset guidance document in terms of what headsets, because again, every student needs a headset with a microphone because of the audio and the speaking components. We have what we call the testing site capacity estimator. This is a really handy tool if you've not tested before or your network really changes. You put in where the COS service device is going to be, if it's getting the content from DRC, if it's at the district or at the locally. We also give you, you're going to be on the East Coast for the test region, of course. How number of students are going to be testing at the same time, not the number of students testing at the site, but how many students are going to be testing the different testing domains at the same time. Put in your network information, and we're going to give you a really good, pretty accurate time frame assessment of what the response times are going to be when they launch the DRC Insight Secure application, when they select the content for the first time, and what it's like as they go through the different tests, the different assessments. We give a quick guide on where to put the COS service device, and it's just that. It's a guide. It's not hard and fast rules. It's based on your network and the number of students you're going to be testing. So it just, it doesn't make sense to do it locally or at the district. I personally err locally because, again, it reduces the variability, but again, logistically, that may not be possible for you. So do what makes sense for you. Here is the online tools training that I mentioned at the very beginning, that we want all students to be able to come in here, play with the different tools, get familiar with them, get familiar with the different question types they're going to get, how to turn on and off audio and things like that. It's based on you do it from the DRC Insight Secure application, or it's a public URL. This is not secure content. So it can be done anywhere using a Chrome browser or Safari on an iPad. So you can do it anytime, students can do it anytime. Another key stakeholder is parents can do this at any time to see what the types of questions and what the test looks like for their students before they come into test. Lastly, give us a call if you have any questions. We have a dedicated toll-free number. Give us a call. Option 2, these are our hours. Or if it's not urgent and something you can describe in an email us, and we get back to you generally within 24 hours. So these are just some of the things we will help you with. It's probably a pretty exhaustive list. So, but these are just some of the things. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate, give us a call. So with that, I'm wrapping up. We're a couple minutes over, but I'm fine staying on as long as you guys do if you have questions. Again, the recording of this session and the slides are going to be available on the Connecticut DRC Lost Links website. It's a little bit easier to read up here. Go there in a few days after we get this updated. All right, any final questions?
Jim, we actually are booked up until 4
Oh.
Eastern, so we have time. We can
Oh.
let people go early, but there is, yeah, we're definitely not over.
I'm sorry,
that-
I was thinking an hour and a half. So
Yeah.
thank you for
No,
that.
no, we have
clarification.
time.
We have time. So
All
now I
right,
don't
so-
feel bad anymore.
Yeah, there was one more question. Have you tested COS servers with virus control software? Do you have specific antivirus software? Do not scan folders and
We-
files.
We do not test with any kind of specific antivirus software out there because there are so many different ones. I mean, you know, you probably have your common 3 or 4, but there's a lot more. But what I would say is, again, we're in 50,000 locations. Doesn't mean that, you know, antivirus couldn't have a new updated version that might cause an issue, but to date, there isn't anything like that has caused an issue. So again, we don't. That is one thing you want to leave running in the background, regardless. If it's taking CPU and memory, that's fine because you want that running in your environment. So I want to be clear, I would not recommend you disable those from your testing devices. It's more instructional software and things like that. But no, we have not tested anything specifically, nor do we have any kind of recommendations or things that we say we support. But I think we're pretty good. We got it pretty well covered.
All right, and somebody asked about the last link's URL. Oh, no. So this was not the client's, the host COS server URL. Somebody
Oh,
asked.
I mean,
but
well,
that
yeah, I mean,
last-
the same, I think it was referring back to the antivirus. Even on the
Right.
servers, yes, I mean, understanding that, you know, because we in our environment run antivirus on our server environment as well. And again, we're not seeing anything on any of the districts or sites that are running antivirus locally or on their server environment where there's any kind of conflict. So I think we got, again, both of them covered pretty well. Hopefully that was better answer.
Yeah.
Cover the server side of it as well.
And then somebody asked for the URL that you were demonstrating on your screen. So I posted for everybody in the chat the Connecticut DRC website where you can find all this information, all of our documentation that is posted. And if you go to the technology box, technology resources, that's it. So you will scroll down from there. thelastlinks.com/Connecticut-information. And if you scroll down from there, you will go to technology resources. That's where you have all of our updated documentation.
Yeah, so this is the landing page, and as Catherine said, you scroll down and you get to this page, you know, this box later on down the page that lists off all of the docs. The screenshot was taken a little while ago, so I think these dates are probably more current than what the screenshot is. So, but just note that.
Let's wait another minute. See if anybody else has any other questions, but so far we've covered all the questions. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think we can wrap this up then, Jim.
All right, thanks everybody for your time.
All right, thank you, everyone. And again, we'll post this afternoon. So this will be people asking for the URL for the presentation. It's not up yet. It will be posted later today, but again, on the same site that this DRC Connecticut Last Links website under the technology resources. You'll scroll down and you will see CSD IT webinars for 22-23, and we'll have the slides and the recording posted by tomorrow morning. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.